Hello everyone, welcome to ET Studios, and today we're having a look at something I don't usually talk about, but let's talk about it because it does affect me, and it is an interesting story, so let's have a look and see what we can talk about. So AMD recently announced that their new Zen 3 series CPUs, which is their 4000 series CPUs, will not be supported on B450 and X470 motherboards. However, there was a lot of backlash on that decision. There was a lot of conversation on Reddit and other social media platforms. And eventually, a couple weeks later, AMD said, okay, look, we will be supporting Zen 3 on B450 motherboards, but they're not doing what they did with their Zen 2 support, which is giving vendors the choice of doing it and giving them all of the code necessary and being able to modify their BIOS as much as they want. They're literally giving them code to say, this can support Zen 3. It's a bit more complicated than that, but basically they're giving them less support options than before because B450 wasn't in their initial plan, neither was X470 to be supported by Zen 3, and if you want more information on that, I'm sure there's plenty of other videos that are going to be longer to explain this full situation, but I'm just here to give you a very brief rundown. So, essentially, B450 and X470 will be supported if the vendors of the motherboards decide, such as my motherboard, which is an MSI Max Series board, and they did have some documentation saying that they will support all AM4 CPUs. So they have a bit of a legal problem if they don't, because they did say that they would be able to. So I'm pretty sure they were one of the motherboard manufacturers that were heading the charge and making sure that AMD would support Zen 3 on B450 and X470. But I'm quite happy because the Max series has, in most cases, a 32 megabyte ROM. And that was the main issue with supporting newer CPUs, as well as a couple other factors, I think. But the main problem was that most motherboards have a 16 megabyte ROM on them, and they couldn't fit all of the CPUs they wanted onto that ROM. They would have to cancel support for older CPUs to have newer ones. And that's where the next big part comes in with this whole situation. If you have a B450 or an X470 motherboard, and you currently have a first, second, or third gen CPU, when you want to get that fourth gen CPU, you will need to do a BIOS update like you did if you went to Zen 3 and you didn't have a motherboard that supported it before. But the next thing is that you will need to confirm that you are getting a Zen 3 CPU, a 4000 series processor, and that you have a supported motherboard. Because if you update your BIOS for some of these boards, not all of them, but some of them, you will have to release the support for the older CPUs. So, for example, if you had the original B450 Tomahawk, if it had a 16 megabyte ROM, and they decide to have support for the new CPUs, they could remove support for first and second gen CPUs, and have only third and fourth gen CPUs on there. So if you have a third gen CPU now, you'll probably still be able to use it until your fourth gen CPU arrives. But in other cases, they may remove support for all three, and you'll be locked out of your motherboard until you put that new CPU in. So they're going to make sure you understand exactly what you're getting into when you update these BIOSes, because sometimes when you update, you will no longer be able to boot that PC until you get the new CPU. So it's a bit of an interesting situation. I'm glad that they have to really verify that you have that CPU and the motherboard, because if you, for example, right now have a BIOS update come out and you just do it because you want the new whatever features or whatever fixes they've done to the board, for example, maybe they've added support for faster RAM or more RAM or something like that. Those updates are fairly basic and they won't change anything to do with CPU support. Obviously, flashing your BIOS isn't really something I would do as common as a graphics card update because it can break your system if the power goes off or something during the update. But it is something more common than not. So it does happen relatively often. And if you happen to update this and suddenly you can't boot your system, there will be a lot of angry people on the internet. And there'll probably have to be an RMA, so you send your motherboard back, say your motherboard is bricked, and they have to send you a new one, and it's a whole issue. So they're going to say, look, this motherboard BIOS will brick your system if you have a first or second gen CPU, and in some cases a third gen CPU as well, and you will only be able to use your system once you put in that fourth gen CPU. So, and also, you will not be able to go back to the older BIOS version in most cases. So, if you update to the latest version, you will not be able to say, oh, my fourth gen CPU is DOA, and you have to send it back. You cannot go back to that third gen supporting BIOS to run your old CPU. You have to get an RMA or something like that in most cases, because it's just a bit more difficult for them to do, and that in most cases that won't be a situation. Like, think about it, if you're upgrading from your Ryzen 5 1600 to a Ryzen 5 4600, say, right, the ones that are going to come out at some point, then you probably won't ever need to go back to supporting your first CPU. Now, there will be some cases where that will happen, and they will be very unfortunate, but I think it's a lot better than the alternative, which is needing to buy a new motherboard in the first place because it just doesn't support the 4th gen CPUs. So, that is my general overview of the situation. If you have further questions, you can leave them in the comment section below. I will link an article relating to the whole situation down below, and I'll also link the Gamers Nexus videos because they are very informative and very helpful, so you can have a look at those. They're a bit longer and go a bit more into depth with the situation. But this has been my super simple general overview of the situation. I do hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like and subscribe, and check out my review of the Ryzen 5 3600 with a B450 Mortar Max, which will be linked below and in a card above. So thank you for watching. There's a Discord server below as well. If you'd like to join that and join our community, that would be great. So thank you for watching, and goodbye.